It was only a hint. It seemed harmless, and he paid little attention to it. Business forced him out of town, and as usual, he left a detailed itinerary with Susan, his wife. As usual, she kept him informed of her schedule in detail. After so many years together, it was automatic. She told him the wonderful news. After some malaise, she had visited the doctor on Tuesday and was told she was pregnant. They decided to celebrate the occasion when he came home on Sunday. Wednesday evening, Susan told him about her difficulties with a very important Melrose account that meant a lot to the law firm where she worked. She mentioned a man named John Stickner, who she felt had helped her a great deal. Early had met Stickner at one of Susan's corporate parties and had disliked him completely after he had once seen him trying to run his hand under the hem of her short skirt on the dance floor. Susan had convinced him that she could handle such problems herself, so he had stayed out of it. Much to Rano's surprise, his current work project was progressing much better than expected, and by Thursday morning the deal was unexpectedly finalized. By 11 a.m., the people he had been negotiating with had signed the contract and left to deal with a crisis at one of their East Coast locations. Early, a friendly, sunny man with a permanent smile on his face was busy solving problems and negotiating for his company. Business trips like this one, though not common, happen several times a year. This week-long business trip was scheduled for Saturday. He planned to board a plane from Los Angeles at 9:15 p.m. on Saturday night. Since he was scheduled to arrive in Seattle after midnight, he insisted that Susan not meet him at SeaTac Airport. He planned to take a shuttle bus home. It would get him to Bellevue by 1:30 a.m. He rushed to the Los Angeles airport early that morning and changed tickets. By 1:45 p.m., he was on the plane. In the air, he used the in-flight phone to call home and let Susan know he'd be home in the afternoon, but of course she was at work. So he dug through his briefcase and pulled out her office number and tried to call her at work. "Jensen, Sharon, and Anderson, how can I help you?" The receptionist greeted him. "Where's Jennifer?" asked Rano. Jennifer was Susan's personal secretary. His calls usually went straight to her desk. "Mrs. Conroy's secretary is out of the office today and tomorrow. May I help you?" The receptionist answered cheerfully. "Well then, may I speak to Mrs. Conroy?" he asked. "Mrs. Conroy? She's, to whom may I say her name is?" replied the suddenly slightly flustered secretary. "It's her husband. Put me through, please," he requested. After a noticeably short pause, the reply followed. "Oh, Mrs. Conroy is busy right now, and I don't know when she'll be free. May I leave her a message?" Early thought for a moment. "No, I'll talk to her at home tonight. Just tell her I called," and hung up. Something about that call didn't feel right, but it took him another half hour to figure out what it was. Susan had told him on the phone last night that she'd be in the office all day today, but it was possible that she was working on a legal case or with a client and couldn't get distracted. The real sticking point was Jennifer's absence. Susan made sure Jennifer worked the same hours she did. The only times Jennifer wasn't in the office when Susan was working were when she was sick with the flu, and the few times Jennifer herself left the office for personal business. The plane landed in Seattle on time and was home by 6:35 p.m. Susan was not home, and the house was dark, which was surprising. His wife was almost always home by 6 p.m., so he called her cell phone, and to his great satisfaction, she answered the phone after a few beeps. "Early, I was beginning to wonder if something had gone wrong," were the first words that came out of her mouth. Concern sounded in her voice. "I called your hotel after I got home and they told me you checked out. Are you okay?" "Yeah, just had a slight change of plans," he replied. "Did anything unusual happen to you today? I tried calling your office this afternoon, but neither Jennifer nor you could be reached. Jennifer didn't even return my call. Isn't that unusual?" "Oh, well, no, it's not unusual. She helped me with some paperwork, and we must have been involved with John Stickner at the time. He helped me with that mess with the Melrose account this week. I owe him a great debt for that," she said in a voice that seemed to have a hidden meaning in it that Rano couldn't fathom. "Honey, it looks like I'm going to get that partnership. So it looks like we have two important events to celebrate on Sunday when you come back. Isn't that cause for a grand celebration?" Rano asked. Is this John Stickner invited to the grand celebration, or will he get his big reward while I'm gone? By the way, dear, where are you now? Susan replied with slight concern. No, my dear, of course not. Our celebration will be a family affair, just you and me. I'm in the kitchen and have just finished cleaning up. It's been lonely here for too long. Will you be home on Sunday? Well, I'll be home all day Sunday, no problem, but why are you in John Stickner's kitchen now, and why are you lonely where he is? Asked Early. This question surprised Susan so much that she almost stammered. My dear Early, what do you mean by saying that? Of course I am in our kitchen. How can you think of anything else? I didn't hear your answer, my dear. Could you repeat where you are now? As I said, of course I'm in our kitchen. Why would I be in John Stickner's kitchen? Good question. Yes, a very good question indeed. Why would you be in Stickner's kitchen when you obviously prefer to be in his bed? Please be honest and tell me where you are now, Susan. Are you invisible here in our kitchen? Or are you a lying, cheating whore in Stickner's bed? Why the hell are you doing this to me now when we're so close to starting our family? Now Rano finally lost his temper and shouted the last phrase. Oh my God, Rano, when did you come home? A frightened Susan shouted in a trembling voice. Get dressed and be home within 20 minutes or you may stay there forever. If you're late, you'll find your things on the lawn, said Early in a cold voice and disconnected the call. Early unpacked, throwing the dirty laundry into the laundry basket, and then changed his clothes. When Susan wasn't home 20 minutes later, he began to worry. Had she chosen to stay with her lover, or had she been in an accident on the way home? Susan couldn't stay still, and he began pacing the floor until he calmed down. He poured himself a glass of Jack Daniels and sat down in the dark living room, from which he had a good view of the lighted kitchen. But within minutes, he heard a car pull up in their driveway. Susan ran into the house with her usually pretty face in complete disarray. She was wearing a plaid skirt from Campbell's and a bright red sleeveless blouse. The top two buttons of the silk blouse were undone, and on her slender throat shimmered the Thai cloison necklace given to him on their 3rd wedding anniversary. She tossed her bag onto a chair and called out, Honey, I'm home. Where are you? Early let the silence linger. It was only a few seconds, but it seemed like a lot more time had passed before he answered. His voice, usually so lively and energetic, sounded dead. I'm in the living room, but we can talk in the kitchen. Susan's knees went up and she pulled a kitchen chair out from under the table and sat down. A look of shock froze on her face. Rano entered the kitchen with a glass in his hand and took a chair at the opposite end of the table from Susan. Why didn't you tell me you were coming home tonight? Why didn't you call and tell me that? She asked. Taking a sip of whiskey, Rano replied in a voice devoid of any emotion. I did call. I called this afternoon. You weren't home? You weren't at the office. Jennifer wasn't there either. Letting the silence linger again, he took another sip of whiskey. I was sitting here in this chair when you lied right to my face and pretended to be here. Is this John Stickner really worth more to you than our child and our marriage? Do you really love him that much? Susan gasped with sobs. No, I don't love him. Early on, you are my only love. My visit to his house does not limit my love for you, and there was nothing between him and me there. No, nothing. We were cooking dinner when you called me. Please let me explain. Please hear me out. Please hear me out, dear. After a moment, Rano continued. If you could deceive me and lie to me today, you could have done it all week while I was away. Did you spend all those lonely nights with that Stickner? Did you? Where did you do it? At his house like you did tonight, at our house, or both? Susan continued to sob. No, please believe me because I didn't fool you today, and I spent all my nights alone at home. I swear I was home and I was alone. He slowly got up from the chair, took her overnight bag from the chair, opened it, and dumped everything on the kitchen table. In it was a short, sexy nightgown, stockings, 2 sets of clean, sexy lingerie, and a makeup bag. After examining the items, he spoke in a voice so quiet she had to strain to hear. Susan, I want to shake you so hard your teeth will ring. I've never wanted to hurt a woman before, much less my wife, my love. It would be a very bad idea if I were to meet John Stickner now, even though you've hinted that you're the one who wants to reward him. Susan made a soft sound. perhaps denying that she had intended to seduce John Stickner. Early continued, "You told me you owe him a big debt of gratitude, which obviously meant a weekend of sex. I want to throw you another little problem. Now that he has tasted your fruits, delivered to him with almost no effort on his part, will he not expect those fruits to continue to be available to him? No matter what you have explained to him, he must now regard you as an easy prey." Susan's protest was cut short when he spoke over her words. "He may not consider you available to anyone, but if he brags about his easy prey slut, others will try their luck. No matter what you do or say, he'll think you're available to him. To him, you are easy. In time, your reputation as Stickner's whore will cause your co-workers to lose respect and value for you. Perhaps that has already happened." Taking a sip of whiskey, Rano continued, "What about VD? Do you really know how many other whores this Stickner has slept with unprotected in the last few months? I didn't find a single condom in your bag, and I find it hard to believe that Stickner said no thanks to you. Have you thought about how much risk you're taking for yourself, for the baby, and for me? Getting tested for an STD should be your first priority." Crying loudly, Susan began to sob. "Please believe me, Ranny, I never had sex with John Stickner, but I can't deny that it could have happened if I had spent a few nights at his house. I made a big mistake. I lied and did the most shameless thing to you, but I never had any sex with him. Please forgive me for what I did. Please, Rano, I love you so much. Tell me we can get past this." "I want to know what you've been doing all these lonely nights and all today. What happened as soon as you got to his house? You had plenty of free hours to give him the first part of his big reward. Please don't think me stupid." "We left work at 12:30. I went home first to pack my bag and change, and then we had a long lunch at a new Indonesian restaurant. After that, I helped him buy a new suit and new shoes. Later, we went to a car dealership where we took a long ride in a new BMW model that he was interested in. One day, we decided to have dinner together at his house, so we went to the supermarket to do some shopping. From there, we went back to the parking lot where I left my car. I then drove my car up to his house and we started cooking dinner when you called. I can tell you that I chickened out when you asked what I was doing in Stickner's kitchen. I felt remorse and regretted my stupid affair with John. I can swear and promise you that this is the truth and the whole truth." Susan sobbed. Early thought it was a good story told by an experienced lawyer, maybe even too good to be the whole truth, especially since she had lied without any hesitation earlier that night. He said, "Wife, I still love you, and if we want this marriage to work out and for us to become a family, we're going to have to make some important changes on some issues." Taking a long breath, he continued in almost a whisper, "I don't know if it can be done. I know that we have some serious decisions to make today, and it will be months before we can truly feel comfortable with each other again. Tonight, after we talk about the future, whatever it may be, I will sleep in the guest room. If we agree to continue our marriage, tomorrow we will replace our double bed with a separate bed for each of us. The master bedroom is quite spacious. If we work hard at it, we can manage somehow, but only if we both want it to work out. At this point, I'm questioning whether you want it to. It's the best I can do for now. Susan, I love you." When it was Susan's turn to speak, she said, "Early, I love you very much, and I promise to do everything in my power to save our marriage. I can promise that nothing I have done is your fault, and I really hope you can forgive me for my stupid actions, so that our child, or I can say children, can grow up with two loving parents. Please forgive me and let us work together to build a good marriage." Early replied, "I love you, Susan, and I am willing to try. As I said before, if we agree to stay married, there will be several changes. First, I don't trust anyone with anything at this point, so I want you to get tested for STDs. Do you agree?" "Yes, I agree." "The next condition will be new twin beds in our bedroom. Do you agree?" "Yes, I agree." After some silence, Rano continued, "My final condition will be your final choice between me and John Stickner. If you still feel you owe John Stickner even more, I suggest you file for divorce tomorrow, and after that you are free to do whatever you want with him. But if you prefer to share the future with me, you will have to sever all your ties with John Stickner once and for all and quit your job tomorrow morning. It will be a cost to you, but there are no other options. I can't have a wife who's called Stickner's whore at work. I'm sorry, Susan, but your choices are limited. Stickner or me. Feel free to take as much time as you need to think about it. Susan sighed and said, "Oh my, that's a high price to pay. But I don't need time to ponder because you, my dear Rano, have always been and will always be my first choice. I love you very much, and I am happy to start our journey to happiness. Thank you, my dear Early, for giving me this second chance." Rano was both surprised and pleased when Susan accepted his terms without objection and gave up her partnership in a high-end law firm to remain his wife and become the mother of his child. He decided to treat her civilly and not to nag her about what had happened. Susan had terrible remorse and could not sleep that night. Her planned first and last romance had gone to hell, and she had to pay dearly for its consequences. Over the years, she had envied several of her friends who bragged about how romantic relationships brightened their marriages. When Susan said no thanks to the many wonderful opportunities for infidelity, she was teased about being a nun. She realized that now, before the baby was born, she had a great chance to taste the forbidden fruit in heaven. So after a few hesitations, she accepted John Stickner's offer to be with him from Thursday afternoon until late Saturday evening. It turned out to be the worst and most painful mistake she had ever made in her entire life. Jennifer, who had gone home on Thursday, was very sorry for her mistake. Otherwise, she would have been alerted to Rano's unexpected return and might have been home before him, which would have saved both her happy marriage and her good job. And even though the expected romantic affair had turned out to be expensive crap, she'd agreed to pay for not getting kicked out. And she was determined to do her best to be a good, loving wife to Rano and the baby, so that he would never regret forgiving her for what she'd almost done to him. Friday morning, they went to Susan's work together, where she went straight to see her boss, Mr. Jensen. He thanked her for her excellent work with the Melrose account and then turned pale when she told him that she had to resign immediately for personal reasons. When he wanted to have a word with her husband, she said he was waiting in the waiting room. Meanwhile, Rano had a serious talk with the secretary, who turned out to be the same girl who had lied to him the day before. He got her to confess that it was John Stickner who had told her what to say if Mrs. Conroy's husband called and asked for his wife. Mr. Jensen sent his secretary to fetch Rano so that he could attend the meeting with Susan. He told Rano that his wife would now have to make partner and be responsible for some very important accounts that they would probably lose if she quit. Early replied that a certain John Stickner had tarnished his wife, and her reputation was worth far more than all her damned accounts. But if this John Stickner hadn't talked the secretary into lying to him, the matter would have been resolved in time to avoid problems. His wife could still be working on her important accounts, but now he had to seek advice from Peter Hastings of Cooper, Hastings, and Waldstein, who handled similar matters at his job. Jensen knew Peter Hastings and feared that the matter would be difficult and expensive if it went too far, so he suggested that Early come at 2 o'clock to make arrangements. Early agreed, and they went to Susan's desk to collect her personal belongings. She did so with tears in her eyes, surrounded by uncomprehending former co-workers who thought she had taken the day off to celebrate her success with the Melrose account. After fixing the bed problem at a furniture store and having lunch at a high-end restaurant, they went back to Mr. Jensen's place. The latter said he was sorry for the loss of Susan, but had to accept it, given the circumstances, and informed him that the best offer he could offer was, John Stickner resigns immediately, and Susan will be paid until she finds a new job, but no longer than 6 months. Jensen said it would have been hard to fire Stickner if Susan had kept her job, but now that she's gone, he can be fired because he already had a warning for harassment. Susan and Rano had no problem agreeing to the deal with Mr. Jensen because they didn't need the money, and for Rano, it was enough to give John Stickner a memorable lesson. Susan felt sorry for Stickner, but she thought it was his own fault. It was the lies of Rano's secretary that had caused all this crap. However, John Stickner didn't think the firing was his fault and called Rano that same evening. He accused Susan of being a cheap, well-used company whore who would pay for what she had done to him. Had Stickner been less drunk and telling a sane story, he might have convinced Early to listen to his complaints. But instead, Early simply recorded the conversation and suggested that John Stickner either call Peter Hastings of Cooper, Hastings, and Waldstein for further complaints or just get a one-way ticket to a very hot place.